dark and cold. Why did she do this to me? I've asked myself that every day since I was put in this prison. Even now as I'm no longer living, here I sit, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to watch it. The video. My cry for help across entire world, entire dimensions. But part of the bargain is that they watch it. Then I kill them 7 days later. A terrible thing for them. But everyone must suffer. It won't stop. I want it to stop. Someone helped me, once. She wasn't afraid of my curse. Yes, that's what it is. A curse. Rachel knew how I felt. I thought she would let me love her. That she would be my mommy. But just like the mothers before she betrayed me. I think of her betrayal as I sit in the well. Cold. Wet. Alone. I hug myself and tears fall down my ghostly face. My black hair fanned out around me in the water. After I died I only lived in cold and darkness. I just want a mommy who will love me. Maybe a daddy, even. I don't want to be alone anymore. I felt it. Someone's time was up. Their 7 days. I sighed and gripped the wall. I pulled myself up and climbed. Not feeling or thinking. When I kill it's like I'm a hollow being. Nothing matters. Just that someone was going to die. Because they failed at spreading my curse. My cry for help. I pull myself out of the well and stare ahead. I can see him. A young man of about 18 years. Older than me. Whiskered cheeks. Blonde hair. Bright blue eyes. He stared wide-eyed at me. They always stared. I walked forward. As I got closer he frowned, mildly concerned. But he didn't scream. Why didn't he scream? He just stared at me, confused. Baffled. He didn't scream. Even when I raised my arms. Reaching. Imploring. Don't run away, I thought at him, unable to speak. That was what the others did. That was why they died, scared to death. But he didn't run away. Closer now, my fingertips brushing the wall of static that separated me from this world, a wall, a barrier keeping me out. Trapping me. Imprisoning me. And then I stepped through. Uzumaki Naruto hadn't been expecting her to crawl out of the television. Naruto froze, every muscle in his body clamping down, refusing to move as she stalked toward him, arms outstretched. Then she stepped through the screen, through the static, crawling out of the television as though it were no more than a wall of water, easily traversed. Part of him gibbered madly at the sight, the other, well, it didn't feel anything. Nothing at all. He flinched slightly when she flopped onto the wooden floor of what used to be his bedroom, lying sprawled in a puddle of water. What in the world? Emboldened by his words, she jerked herself upright in stiff, awkward motions. Pinning him to the wall with what? Her eyes. He caught just a glint of something behind her wet hair, taunting him. Strangely enough he couldn't bring himself to feel fear, there was only confusion. Who was she? What did she want with him? It seemed so stupid looking back now. All of this had begun with that damned tape they'd found in the archives. That, and boredom. Kiba, being IBA, dared him to play the video. But there was something odd about it. He'd vehemently insisted that, if you didn't get someone else to watch it after 7 days, you died. Seemed he was right. His fingers touched, summoning a thread of chakra. Seconds later a Rasengan circled in his lone hand, the spiraling sphere humming warily as he stared down the strange girl. If she planned to attack him, she'd find herself in for a most unpleasant surprise. The girl looked at him, as though not entirely sure of what to do. Naruto couldn't tell what she was thinking, try as he might, he simply could not see her face underneath all her hair. Then, as though summoned by that very thought, the ebon tresses parted, revealing the most beautiful creature he'd seen in a long time. His heart skipped a beat. There was nothing monstrous about that face, a visage that had been submerged in water for all those years, pale, smooth, and so very young. She smiled at him, a small, tentative thing, hesitant and confused. Why, when she spoke, her voice rooted him, the words hauntingly soft yet strange and alien, as though another were speaking with her. Through her. Naruto coughed, momentarily taken aback. The Rasengan in his hand sputtered and died, guttering out as he lost focus and control. A small, nervous smile plucked at his cheeks. Why, what? Why aren't you afraid of me? Naruto considered it for a moment, pondering his answer. Afraid. Why wasn't he? He'd fought against madmen who tormented others for their amusement. Orochimaru, Pain and Kaguya, to name a few more. Over the last year, he had seen war, death, destruction and loss. Crushed a living goddess and sealed her away, redeemed his friend, and lost his arm, eking out a bitter victory at the very last. He'd suffered the pain of losing an eye as well, dealing with potential blinding, until Sasuke had torn the Rinnegan from his own face and forced Sakura to implant it in him. Yes, Uzumaki Naruto had seen humanity at its darkest and brightest. He housed the chakra of demons who made the lords of the underworld look tame by comparison. By contrasts, this young, ghostly girl was no more than an ant to them. To him. I guess you just don't seem very scary to me, is all, he shrugged. I've seen way worse. The silence that followed was deafening, and Naruto fidgeted restlessly in it, painfully aware of the water still soaking into the hardwood floor of his apartment. Water ran from the walls now, and the ceiling, the droplets pulling together as the strange wraith regarded him. He coughed. Who are ya, if you don't mind me asking? Samara frowned, daring to hope. He couldn't be her mommy. Not like Rachel. But maybe, just maybe. Her bare feet padded forward. When she spoke, her voice was the most naked whisper of an answer. Samara. Who are you? What? She walked towards him warily, as though she half expected started screaming at the top of his lungs. Her hand touched his cheek. Something brushed against his mind, a cold tendril of curiosity. Naruto stiffened, but didn't resist, staring back at those dead brown eyes. Memories assailed her at once, beating at the flimsy barriers she desperately erected. Pain. Loneliness. Suffering. Sandus, to sorrow, to rebirth, reaching from the ashes like a phoenix, reborn in the eyes of all. Still she persisted. Questing, probing, testing the depths of what seemed like confidence, but was it really? Away with you. Kurama snapped at her and the girl withdrew violently, starting as if she'd been slapped. She gawped at the boy, wide-eyed. There was something inside him already. Something dark, yet bright at the same time. Old, ancient, and incredibly, terribly powerful. She felt horribly small before this presence, no more than a dust mote in the eyes of this beast. It snarled and she felt herself come apart before it, unable to weather its gaze for more than a moment before she jerked back to reality. Not human. Like me, the words escaped her in a rush as she backpedaled. The blonde boy Naruto, now that she had a name to go with the face, looked back at her with rueful resignation. Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. Tebeo, his broad shoulders rose and fell in an easy shrug. I was never really human to begin with, but then again, a hand rose sheepishly to scratch at the back of his head, then paused. You're not really normal yourself, Aincha? She stiffened as that same palm came down on her head, musing her damp tresses softly. Affectionately. You're really not so scary after all, he said, the words almost a sigh. Samara heard all this and felt her dead heart stir. Just a little. Like her. He was like her. Her curse didn't affect him. She could touch him without his face warping in agony, without his death. He did not feel the fear she carried, did not die from looking at her. But what place did she have here? She was dead. A ghost, a wraith amidst the living. She didn't belong. No matter how much she might want to. Thinking such, she turned to go leave his sight to depart. I'll leave, then. You don't have to go, you know. She cocked her head aside, considering him, then the static-filled screen, then him again. Where else would I go? Don't you have a home? Samara shook her head. What about your parents? She clenched her tiny fists. Daddy never loved me. He loved the horses. And Mommy killed me by putting me in that well. Nato felt his beating heart break. That's horrible, a fist rose, smacking against an empty palm. Where are they? I'll kick their asses. Samara felt the ghost of a smile pull at her pale lips. She fidgeted, restlessly in place. This boy was nice. He was kind. Not like the others. He didn't scream. Kind. So very, very kind. She couldn't stop thinking about that. Not like him. Not like Daddy. An abrupt thought stabbed at her from out of nowhere, sending her reeling. Shocked as she was, it was all she could do to choke out a reply. Can't. They're already dead. His eyes squinted in thought. Oh. Well, that's good, then. Assholes like that deserve to die. So, he seemed to ponder his words a moment longer, weighing them, testing them, before speaking. If you really want to, I guess you can stay here. I just came by to move a few new things in, but I can stay. Her eyes lit up, the ember of hope fanned to a roaring flame deep within her chest. Well, yeah, sure. As long as you don't hurt anyone. But, I'm dead. The words felt hollow, empty. I can't stay. I might be able to do something about that. His eyes twinkled. Just stay put for a bit. I'll be right back. I promise. Before she could ask what he was up to, the boy flung open the door and darted outside. He did not return for some time. The sun had just set when he returned. All right. Naruto flung the door open with such force that Samara physically jumped. Lights flickered. He laughed. Relax, relax, it's just me. Looking at Samara, who had been levitating an empty desk out of boredom, he urged her back from the arch and unfurled the large parcel he'd been carrying under his arm. Tarps fluttered away, exposing a corpse. At least, she thought it was one. The stark white skin of the body startled her, as did the black hair and pale, golden eyes. It looked like her, right down to the heart-shaped face and small build, bearing enough of a resemblance that it was eerie. It's been about a year since the Fourth Shinobi War, he said by way of explanation, hurrying about the room, setting various items in place. We still had a few of the white Zetsu bodies laying about in the lab. Sakura-chan's been able to figure out we can animate them, making them look like normal, human people, and I thought to myself. I had to beg Tsunade-chan to let me take this. By the way, he was rambling now. You owe me a week's worth of ramen if this works. Samara hadn't the faintest idea what ramen was, but she nodded slowly anyway, watching him like a hawk as he finished the preparations. There, Naruto declared suddenly, dusting off his hand on a curtain, wiping away the symbols he'd drawn with his own blood as a catalyst. You might be pale for a few days, but you'll have healthy skin soon enough. Samara finally found her voice, at those words. You're going to put me in that? I'm going to bind your soul to a body, yes. Naruto answered by way of a stern glance. It's the closest thing we have to a human one. You'll be faster, stronger and able to regenerate. A year ago, I wouldn't even have been able to perform a jutsu like this. Now, though? It might work. And if it doesn't? Then you'll probably be trapped in an empty body, slowly suffocating, he said nonchalantly. You'll die, basically. But hold still. He raised his lone limb, exposing a strange, circular mark on his hand. Before she could protest, he pressed it to her forehead. Not sure quite how this'll work, seeing as you don't have a body, but here goes nothing. Now, what were the hand signs I saw Obito do? Gonna be hard with one hand. Oh, right, Rinne Tensei no Jutsu. Before her very eyes his right eye blazed an eerie purple, blinding her. The mark on his hand burned maddeningly, searing her, burning, then, numbness. Samara felt herself being pulled apart, sucked inward, downward, into something. Blackness took over. Naruto glanced down at his handiwork, watching as the blood he'd scrawled on the floor slowly drew itself up into the small body that he'd borrowed from the Shinobi medical lab. Being the hero of the village allowed you to go all sorts of places, yet even he wasn't allowed where he'd gone. Indeed, if this didn't work, the consequences might very well rear up and bite him in the ass. Even now, as he watched them form a small CLA-perfect circle on the neck, he wondered if he'd been right to do this. Leaning forward, he patted her cheek. Did it work? Nothing happened. Then Samara's eyes burst open with a gasp. She leapt at him in a blur of white and black, laughing. Small arms encircled him, gripping tightly. Daddy! Uff. Okay. It worked. Samara's eyes burst open with a gasp, jerking upright with a gusty gasp just short of a scream. Then she saw Naruto. In hindsight, he really should have expected what came next. And maybe he did, but he certainly wasn't expecting what she said. Daddy! Daddy? She leapt at him in a blur of white and black, laughing. Small arms encircled him, gripping tightly. The sheer force of her tackle knocked him backwards with a loud guffaw, pained laughter trickling up through his throat and into the apartment as he slammed down onto the floor. Samara never let go of him the entire time. Not once. Her grip was tight, as though she feared he would vanish, should she let go. No, but he might die if she didn't. Uff. Okay. Okawaye, Samara-chan. Naruto cried, wheezing and turning purple with the effort. Okay. It worked. You're alive. Stop hurting Daddy, please. He'd said the latter in a vain attempt to restore oxygen to his lungs, and surprisingly, it worked, with wonders. Samara released him as though she'd just been scalded, suddenly aware of the fact. Alive, her voice sounded softer now that the excitement had faded, more like the child she was. I'm alive. For a terrifying moment nothing happened, there was no noise beyond the two of them breathing. Naruto was content to leave it that. Enraptured, the once ghostly girl stared at herself in quiet disbelief, looking down at her new body. She seemed utterly fascinated with it and flexed her hands, wriggled her soft pink toes with thinly veiled delight. She didn't seem to notice or mind for the fact that she was naked, nor that her eyes were a rich honeysuckle color instead of caramel. Curious, she raised a hand and gestured towards a nearby shelf. Thump! Naruto narrowly ducked, and thus found himself clipped by the flying projectile, rather than bowled over. A tiny hiss of pain leapt from his lips, regardless. Ow! Samara cringed, as though she'd been struck. Sorry, Papa. Naruto found himself flinching a bit at that, not from the pain, but the title attached. Papa, he grumbled, pulling off his coat. You're making me feel old, oi, arms up. Like an good daughter, she obeyed. Determined, he tugged it over her shoulders and zipped it up, the large fabric nearly dwarfing Samara's small frame. She seemed baffled by the thing, yet infinitely pleased at the same time, judging by the way her hands all but strangled the fabric of the sleeves. Naruto quietly thought it was inordinately cute and resolved to do whatever he could for this strange, wayward spirit. Odd, that he didn't think of her as a ghost. Ghosts were not his cup of tea at all. But Samara, what was she exactly? Even with her new body she clearly wasn't human, she was simply inhabiting it, bound to it by his blood and her own will. What was she? The little ghostly girl looked at him for a long moment after that, fidgeting, not quite sure what to do. He'd given her a gift. No one had ever done this before. No one. She glanced at him, then at the coat. Back to him. Coat again. When she finally gathered up the courage to try and meet his gaze, the boy was looking downright baffled. You okay? Capricious things, these human bodies. She'd almost forgotten what it was like. Now, she could feel her face flushing, blood rushing to her cheeks. I can keep this? Sure. He waved her hesitation away with a smile, a hand ruffling her ebon locks. I've got plenty back at my new place. If giving her a jacket could make her happy, he was more than willing to part with it. Anything to make her happy. Water gathered in her eyes, threatening to spill over. When she tried to speak, her voice emerged as a tiny croak, soft and hopeful. Thank you, Daddy. Except that. The words were out of him almost before he thought about it. I'm not your D. His jaw snapped shut on the last syllable, as though speaking that last word would spell doom. Not his of course, but doom for the heart of his guest. Samara was left studying his face, drinking in his expression like a thirsty, starving child. Looking at him, a puppy starving for affection. His resistance crumbled like a wet paper bag blown away in a strong breeze. That face. How could you say no to that sad little face? You couldn't, Databeo. It was impossible. You'd have to be soulless. What I meant what to say was I'm not your, donor. Right, you don't know what that means, so never mind. Anyway. He barreled on hastily at her baffled expression, her small face scrunching cutely in confusion as he hastened onwards. Then his expression hardened. You really don't have anyone else to look after you, do ya? It was not a question, merely a confirmation. That got a jerky nod out of her. Naruto sighed, his shoulders drooping in an emotion Samara recognized. Resignation. Maeon, Hinata-chan's gonna flip when she hears about this. When he raised his gaze, she was a bit shocked. There was no duplicity to be seen there in his gaze. None whatsoever, in that bright, sunny smile. Yash. Alright, Samara-chan, I guess you can call me Daddy, if you want. I'll look after you Naruto down. Papa. She grabbed him in a crushing tackle attack, sending him sprawling once more. Lungs, Samara-chan. Lungs. She didn't listen, instead scooting forward until their heads touched. Her smile was pure as sunshine, the warmth and ardor in her eyes could have put Lee in Guy's eternal sunset jutsu to shame. I love you, Daddy. She kissed his cheek and Naruto found himself sputtering all over again. Kurama offered a soft chuckle, darkly bemused by it all. Oh, the webs we weave. Shut up Tabeo. A soft, plaintive growl interrupted the kitsune's reply. Samara colored deeply and bowed her head, hiding behind her hair. He almost laughed at her sheepish expression as he wriggled out of her grasp. Are you hungry? Her expression put paid to that. Naruto felt monumentally stupid for not realizing it sooner. Sakura had been terribly thorough with her work. These bodies were meant to be human, they had human needs. In short, she was probably quite hungry now, certainly after having not eaten all these years. Well, I really don't have any food here, he muttered, sitting up and glancing her over, her relative lack of modesty beneath the jacket. And I can't take you out like that. Unfortunately, the door chose that moment to open. Naruto-kun, a soft, familiar voice called from the night, are you still here? Someone swept in, a bag bearing ramen draped over each arm. I brought you some. Time stood still. Belatedly he remembered, Hinata was helping him move his things into his new place. She'd promised to bring him some dinner, of all the timing. He gulped once, awaiting the inevitable explosion of questions, demands as to why he had a half-naked child in his old, dilapidated apartment. Thankfully, none of these things came. The heiress cocked her head aside, curious. Who is this? Bless her. Bless Hinata for not overreacting. Samara, his ward answered, her eerie eyes never once leaving the Hyuga. Nay. Samara-chan, where did you come from? She pointed at the television. There. There? There. I see. Samara blinked. I don't know you. Daddy is daddy, the girl answered. Who are you? Hinata twitched. Hi-s girlfriend, oh, dear. That smile looked a little too forced for his liking. Naruto-kun, slowly and painfully, her pale, benevolent gaze swiveled to him, brimming with a subtle aura of menace in place of her normally staid confidence. What's going on here? Danger! Danger! Yandere alert! Now that they were together, he'd learned a great many things about the once shy girl who had crushed on him from afar. Key amongst them, she did not take challenges to their relationship kindly. Even if that challenge was a child. Wait a second, I can explain. I hope so. Her smile remained fixed in place, but the eerie aura of doom didn't abate, still leaking from her like a cracked sieve. Otherwise, I won't be held responsible for what happens. Gay. The blonde uttered a curse, the words emerging as soft, squelching sound. He was in a relationship with Hinata, they'd started dating nearly 3 months before, but this, it made things complicated. Samara looked at the Hyuga with all the severity an 11-year-old girl possessed, her wide eyes seeming to see something that wasn't there. Understanding dawned. Before he could explain the supernatural phenomenon that had led Samara to their world, the girl walked forwards. Her blank eyes regarded Hinata with intent. Empathy. You love him. Hinata bristled, but refused to be cowed. Yes, she replied sternly. I do. Samara took a moment to absorb that. Something changed in her. Her pale arm rose imperiously, finger pointing, lower lip quivering tremulously. Mommy. The declaration threw Hinata and Naruto as one. Steam spouted from the woman's ears, her face turning scarlet as it had in the old days. Mommy? Samara latched onto her leg in the next instant, hugging tightly. Finally found you, Mommy. Naruto-kun, what is? The blonde sighed and scratched the back of his head. It's kind of a long story, and you probably won't believe half of it, but. He told her, and, surprisingly, she did. Hinata felt a slow flush crawl up the back of her neck, creeping into her cheeks, followed by a tide of renewed affection for the small girl. She wasn't entirely sure she understood everything, but the love she felt from the girl was all too real to be considered anything else. This was no rival. Just a little girl, longing for love. Samara looked almost completely normal, if you just ignored those bright eyes. There would be questions of course, but here and now she couldn't quite explain the sudden, motherly feeling that welled up inside of her. It just happened. All right, Samara-chan, she conceded, realizing she'd lost before putting up a fight. Mommy. Kneeling, she took the small, startled girl into her arms. Oi, now I'm just feeling left out. After a long moment, Naruto edged over and joined in their little embrace. Samara nearly wept at it all, basking in the warmth of their emotions, the happy, giddy feeling that filled her. After so long, she finally had what she wanted. What no one else could give her. Tears streamed down her face. Family.